Hello. Tonight we begin with something unexpected and essential. Micro habits that fuel depression, but not as you imagine. Nothing about grand psychological theories. This time, you'll just be you. An ordinary person living among the subtle thought patterns that shape your daily experience. So before you get comfortable, like the video and subscribe if this truly resonates with you. Now, adjust your light, take a deep breath, and let's navigate the landscape of your mind together. You find yourself here again, in that familiar space between wakefulness and sleep, where thoughts drift like autumn leaves on a gentle current. The room around you fades as your consciousness begins its nightly descent. Tonight, we explore the quietest of companions, those micro habits that have been fueling your depression, though you've rarely given them names or recognized their faces in the crowd of your daily thoughts. The soft glow of morning light filters through your curtains as you open your eyes. Another day begins, and with it, the subtle dance of thoughts that will shape how you experience each moment. You glance at your phone, scrolling through a message from a friend complimenting something you shared yesterday. "That was really insightful," they wrote. You feel a momentary warmth, but then it happens, that almost imperceptible shift, the subtle discount of this positive moment. They're just being nice, you think? Anyone could have said that. And just like that, the genuine appreciation offered to you dissolves before it can truly be absorbed. This is the first of those micro habits, discounting the positive. It's as though your mind has developed an immune response to compliments, to achievements, to moments of beauty. You notice how automatically this happens, like blinking or breathing. Someone praises your work, and you mentally footnote all the ways it could have been better. You accomplish a goal you've been working toward and immediately minimize its significance. It wasn't that difficult, you tell yourself. Others would have done it better, faster, more elegantly. What would happen, you wonder, if you allowed those positive moments to exist undiluted, if you let them sink into your awareness without the reflexive diminishment? The thought feels almost dangerous, as if accepting goodness might lead to complacency or delusion. But tonight, as you drift towards sleep, consider how this habit shapes your landscape, creating valleys where there might have been peaks, shadows, where there might have been light. You move through your morning routine, the soft padding of your feet against the floor, the ritual of preparing tea or coffee, the quiet hum of the day beginning. As you dress, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and notice a small flaw in your appearance. Perhaps it's the way your hair falls today, or a blemish on your skin, or the fit of your clothes. And there it comes, the second micro habit, self-punishment. You should have taken better care of yourself, the voice whispers. You always let things go like this. The criticism has a strangely comforting familiarity, doesn't it? Like an old sweater worn threadbare but still reached for out of habit. You've been speaking to yourself this way for so long that it feels like truth rather than interpretation. The harshness you would never direct at someone else flows toward you with practiced ease. Notice how your body responds to these thoughts. Perhaps a slight tightening in your shoulders, a heaviness in your chest, a subtle change in your breathing. These physical sensations have become so intertwined with your internal dialogue that they feel like natural states rather than responses to self-directed unkindness. What if, just for today, you spoke to yourself as you would to someone you love, deeply? What if you replaced "you always mess this up" with "you're doing your best with what you have right now"? The very suggestion might feel uncomfortable, even artificial. But discomfort is often the first sign of growth, isn't it? The first indication that we're moving beyond well-worn neural pathways into new territory. As your day continues, you encounter a situation that stirs emotion within you. Perhaps a colleague makes a comment that feels dismissive, or you receive news that shifts your plans, or you simply find yourself feeling melancholy without an obvious catalyst. The feeling rises like a wave, natural, unbidden, powerful in its motion. And here comes the third micro-habit, blaming yourself for having emotions. Why am I so sensitive, you ask yourself? I shouldn't be feeling this way. Other people would handle this better. The secondary layer of suffering begins, not just the original emotion, but the judgment of that emotion, the belief that its very existence is evidence of some fundamental flaw within you. Emotions flow through the human experience like water through a river system, sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always in motion. They are messengers carrying information, not character assessments. Yet how easily we transform them into indictments, especially those we label as negative or inconvenient. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to observe your emotions with the curiosity of a naturalist studying a newly discovered species. How interesting, you might think, that sadness has arrived today. I wonder what it's trying to tell me. This gentle curiosity, this permission to feel without self-condemnation, creates space around the emotion rather than compression. The feeling may remain, but the suffering diminishes when not compounded by shame. The day progresses, and an invitation appears, perhaps a gathering of friends, a community event, or simply an opportunity to engage with the world beyond your immediate surroundings, and with it comes the fourth micro-habit, withdrawing from life. There's a particular flavor to the thoughts that accompany this habit. I'm too tired, you tell yourself. I wouldn't enjoy it anyway. They won't notice if I'm not there. What began perhaps as self-protection has, over time, become self-limitation. The circle of your life contracts so gradually that you hardly notice the narrowing, until one day the world outside your comfortable routines feels not just unappealing, but somewhat threatening in its unfamiliarity. There's wisdom in recognizing your energy limits, in choosing carefully where to invest your presence. But there's also a tipping point where protective withdrawal becomes a barrier to the very connections that might nourish you. The warmth of human interaction, the stimulation of new environments, the perspective that comes from stepping outside familiar thought patterns. These are waters that can both challenge and sustain you. You notice how each of these micro-habits weaves into the next, creating a tapestry of thought and behavior that feels like identity but is actually pattern. Discounting the positive makes it harder to value what you bring to social situations. Self-punishment creates exhaustion that makes withdrawal more appealing. Blaming yourself for emotions makes you less likely to risk the vulnerability of connection. The cycle perpetuates itself with perfect, painful efficiency. As evening approaches, you prepare for the transition to night, the soft rustling of bed sheets, the gradual dimming of lights, the quiet settling of your living space. These sensory experiences invite you toward rest. But before sleep arrives, there's time to consider how these subtle habits might be transformed, not through force or self-criticism, but through gentle awareness. What if, tomorrow morning, you caught that first automatic discount of something positive and simply held it in awareness, not trying to change it immediately, just noticing, there's that habit of minimizing compliments. Recognition itself creates a small space between stimulus and response, a moment where choice becomes possible. Or perhaps you might experiment with speaking to yourself as you would to a beloved friend, not perfectly, not consistently, but as an occasional alternative to the habitual self-punishment. What might change if, just once or twice throughout the day, you offered yourself the same grace you would naturally extend to others? These aren't grand interventions requiring monumental effort. They're micro-adjustments to match the micro-habits. Small shifts in awareness that over time might alter the landscape of your internal experience. As you lie here now, feeling the weight of your body against the mattress, notice how your breath naturally slows. There's no need to force relaxation. It arrives on its own when invited through attention. The same is true for these patterns we've explored. Awareness itself is the beginning of transformation, not as a project of self-improvement, but as an act of self-compassion. The subtle saboteurs we've named tonight, discounting the positive, self-punishment, blaming yourself for emotions, and withdrawing from life, they aren't character flaws or moral failings. They're adaptive strategies that once served a purpose, protecting you from disappointment, preparing you for criticism, helping you conserve limited emotional resources. They were solutions before they became problems, responses to a world that perhaps wasn't always kind or safe. Acknowledging their original purpose doesn't mean continuing to employ them when they no longer serve you. It simply means approaching change with understanding rather than judgment, with patience rather than demand. Sleep begins to draw closer now, that gentle dissolution of conscious thought into the dream world. As you drift, imagine these habitual thought patterns not as enemies to be defeated, but as old acquaintances you've outgrown, familiar presences you can acknowledge with a nod before continuing on your way toward new possibilities. The darkness around you feels protective rather than isolating, a space where transformation happens beneath the threshold of awareness. Your conscious mind may rest, but deeper processes continue, neural pathways subtly shifting, new connections, forming the quiet work of change, proceeding without effort or will. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities, its own moments where these micro-habits might appear. But tonight, you've named them, observed them with curiosity, rather than condemnation. That recognition itself is significant, the beginning of a different relationship with your own mind. As your consciousness continues its gentle descent towards sleep, consider that these patterns, though persistent, are not permanent. The human brain remains remarkably plastic throughout life, capable of forming new pathways when existing ones no longer lead where you wish to go. This capacity for change doesn't require heroic effort. Often, it's the smallest, most consistent adjustments that ultimately create the most sustainable transformation. Your breathing has slowed now, your thoughts becoming less linear, more dreamlike in their associations. The boundary between conscious reflection and sleep grows increasingly permeable. In this liminal space, free from the demands of wakefulness, your mind is free to integrate what we've explored, to process it in ways beyond logical understanding. The first half of our journey through these micro-habits ends here, not with dramatic resolution, but with gentle possibility. The continuation awaits on the other side of sleep, where we'll explore the remaining patterns that so subtly influence your experience. But for now, rest in the knowledge that awareness itself is a form of change, that the simple act of noticing, without immediate demand for transformation, creates space where new choices can eventually emerge. Let sleep approach now that most natural of healers, the state where the conscious mind releases its grip and deeper wisdom is free to work in at its own time, in its own way. Tomorrow brings new opportunities for small, significant shifts in how you relate to yourself and your experience. But tonight is for rest, for the quiet integration that happens beneath the surface of awareness. Your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts more distant, the world around you fading into the background as sleep draws near. The subtle saboteurs we've named will still be there tomorrow. These micro-habits developed over years of practice, but they'll be accompanied now by something new. The awareness that sees them for what they are, patterns, not truths, habits, not identity. This awareness is the beginning, the essential first step toward any lasting change. And for tonight, that beginning is enough. As sleep begins to lighten its hold on you, consciousness returns like the gradual brightening of dawn. You find yourself at the threshold of wakefulness, that liminal space where dreams and reality intermingle. Welcome back to our exploration of those quiet, persistent micro-habits that fuel depression. We've already named 4 of these subtle saboteurs. Now, as you settle more deeply into this space between us, let's continue our journey through the remaining patterns that may have become so familiar they feel like home. Night has passed, and with it, the processing of all we discussed before. Your mind, even in sleep, has been working with these ideas, turning them over like smooth stones in a river. Now, as a new day begins, imagine yourself moving through your morning routine with that same gentle awareness we cultivated earlier. As the day unfolds, perhaps a challenge arises, a difficult emotion, a stressful situation, an uncomfortable memory. Notice what happens in response. There's a subtle turning away, isn't there? A reaching for something that might dull the sharp edges of feeling. This is our 5th micro-habit. Numbing behaviors. Perhaps it's the endless scroll through social media, the background noise of a show you've seen before, the extra glass of wine, the mindless snacking when you aren't hungry, the procurement of things you don't need. The specific form varies from person to person, but the function remains the same, to create distance between yourself and whatever feels too intense to bear in the moment. These numbing behaviors aren't inherently problematic. They become concerning only when they're your primary response to discomfort, when they prevent you from processing what needs attention. Like pain medication that masks symptoms without addressing the underlying cause, numbing offers temporary relief at the cost of deeper healing. You might notice how these behaviors have a particular quality. They often occur almost automatically. Without deliberate decision, you find yourself reaching for your phone before fully registering the feeling that preceded the action. The numbing happens before the awareness of what's being numbed, making it one of the more elusive habits to observe. What might happen if, the next time you notice yourself reaching for a numbing behavior, you paused just long enough to ask, "What am I feeling right now that I'm trying to move away from?" Not to judge or immediately change the behavior, but simply to bring consciousness to what has been unconscious. That small moment of recognition creates a choice where before there was only automatic response. The numbing behavior might still follow, but now with awareness rather than avoidance. And in that awareness lies the seed of potential change, not through forceful resistance, but through curious observation of what drives the pattern. As your day continues, you might find yourself caught in the 6th micro-habit, rumination. Unlike numbing, which moves away from difficult thoughts and feelings, rumination circles around them repeatedly, like water spiraling down a drain. Why did they say that to me? What if I had responded differently? How could I have prevented this? The same questions, the same scenarios, replayed without resolution. There's a peculiar comfort in this mental loop, isn't there? A sense that if you think about the problem long enough, intensely enough, you'll finally find the answer that will set you free. But rumination rarely leads to insight or solution. Instead, it deepens neural pathways of worry and reinforces the perceived importance of whatever triggers your concern. Notice how rumination has a different quality than productive reflection. Reflection moves forward, considering different perspectives, generating new insights. Rumination moves in circles, covering the same ground without progress, often focusing on aspects beyond your control. What someone else did or said, what might happen in an imagined future, what can't be changed about the past. As you recognize this pattern within yourself, there's no need for self-criticism. Rumination, like all these micro-habits, began as an attempt to protect you, to prevent future hurt by analyzing past pain, to prepare for all possibilities by imagining worst-case scenarios. The intention behind it was survival, not suffering. What if, when you notice yourself caught in this mental loop, you gently shift your attention to something concrete and present? The texture of the fabric beneath your fingers, the sounds in your environment, the sensation of your breath moving in and out. Not to escape difficult thoughts, but to ground yourself in the present moment before returning to them with a fresher perspective. Throughout the day, you might also notice the seventh micro-habit, self-neglect. This manifests as postponing basic needs, skipping meals, staying up too late, ignoring physical discomfort, pushing through exhaustion. "I'll rest when I finish this," you tell yourself. "I don't have time to eat properly right now. I can ignore this pain a little longer." Self-neglect often disguises itself as responsibility or productivity. It presents as admirable self-sacrifice rather than what it truly is, a subtle form of self-abandonment. Over time, this pattern creates a profound disconnection from your body's wisdom and needs, teaching you to override the very signals designed to maintain your well-being. The body speaks in sensations rather than words. Hunger, fatigue, tension, pain. These are its language, its way of communicating what it needs to function optimally. When you consistently ignore or override these messages, the communication becomes either louder through illness or breakdown, or quieter through numbness and disconnection. What might change if you began to treat these bodily signals as valuable information rather than inconvenient interruptions? If you responded to fatigue with rest, to hunger with nourishment, to pain with attention? Not perfectly, not in every instance, but often enough to rebuild trust with your physical self. This leads naturally to our eighth micro-habit, waiting for motivation. You find yourself postponing actions that might support your well-being until you feel like doing them. "I'll start exercising when I have more energy," you think. "I'll connect with friends when I feel more social. I'll pursue that interest when inspiration strikes." So this pattern contains a fundamental misunderstanding about how motivation actually works. Contrary to popular belief, action often precedes motivation rather than following it. The act of beginning, even without initial enthusiasm, frequently generates the very feelings that were assumed to be prerequisites. Consider times when you've reluctantly started something only to find yourself engaged and energized once in motion. This isn't coincidence, but neurobiology, the brain's reward systems activating in response to action rather than anticipation. What small action might you take today, not waiting for the feeling that would make it easy, but choosing it anyway? Perhaps a 5-minute walk, a brief message to a friend, 10 minutes spent on a neglected interest. Not as a test or challenge, but as a gentle experiment in how action and motivation relate to each other. As evening approaches once again, you might notice the ninth micro-habit emerging, emotional reasoning. This is the tendency to treat feelings as if they were facts, to let your emotional state determine your perception of reality. "I feel overwhelmed, therefore my situation must be unmanageable. I feel inadequate, therefore I must be failing. I feel alone, therefore no one cares." Emotions provide valuable information about your internal experience, but they aren't reliable narrators of external reality. They're influenced by countless factors: sleep quality, nutrition, past experiences, current stresses, biochemical fluctuations. They change like weather patterns, sometimes gradually, sometimes abruptly, but always in motion. When emotional reasoning takes hold, temporary states feel permanent. Subjective interpretations feel like objective truth. This habit creates a world that seems to confirm your darkest thoughts, because you're viewing everything through the lens of your current emotional state. What if, When you notice strong emotions coloring your perception, you silently acknowledged, "I'm having the feeling of being overwhelmed, inadequate, alone, but that doesn't necessarily mean my situation is as dire as it feels in this moment." This small distinction between feeling and fact creates space for a more nuanced understanding of your experience. As the day draws to a close and you prepare once again for sleep, the 10th micro-habit might make its appearance: all or nothing thinking. This is the tendency to evaluate experiences, efforts, and outcomes in absolute terms. Complete success or total failure, perfect performance or worthless attempt, entirely right or completely wrong. You might recognize this pattern in thoughts like, "I didn't accomplish everything on my list, so today was wasted. I made a mistake in that interaction, so it was a complete disaster. I've been inconsistent with this habit, so I might as well give up entirely." This black and white perspective erases all the shades of grey that make up most of human experience. It transforms partial successes into failures, imperfect efforts into worthless attempts, small setbacks into catastrophic defeats. In doing so, it robs you of the very feedback that might help you adjust and improve incrementally. What would it be like to embrace the good enough that exists between perfection and failure? To acknowledge that most achievements, most days, most interactions contain elements of both success and struggle? This middle path isn't lowering standards, but recognizing the complex, nuanced nature of human experience and growth as you lie here now, having explored these 10 micro-habits, discounting the positive, self-punishment, blaming yourself for emotions, withdrawing from life, numbing behaviors, rumination, self-neglect, waiting for motivation, emotional reasoning, and all-or-nothing thinking. Perhaps you've recognized some that feel particularly familiar. There might be a temptation to use this recognition as further evidence of failure, to turn these insights into weapons of self-criticism. Resist this temptation if you can. These patterns aren't character flaws, but adaptations, strategies developed in response to past experiences, many of which likely served protective functions at one time. They became problematic, not because of some inherent weakness within you, but because they continued beyond their usefulness, operating automatically rather than by conscious choice. Change begins not with force, but with awareness, the simple, profound act of noticing patterns without immediate judgment. This noticing creates small gaps between stimulus and response, tiny spaces where new possibilities can eventually emerge. Tonight, as sleep approaches once again, there's no need to formulate elaborate plans for transformation. Simply rest in the knowledge that awareness itself is the essential first step, that recognition without rejection creates the conditions where change becomes possible. Your body grows heavier against the mattress, your breath naturally slowing, thoughts becoming less linear as sleep draws near. In this state of gentle surrender, your conscious mind releases its grip, allowing deeper processes to continue their work beneath the threshold of awareness. These micro-habits that fuel depression aren't addressed through heroic effort or perfect consistency. They're transformed through small moments of different response, through tiny experiments in alternative ways of relating to yourself and your experience. Each time you notice a pattern without being completely identified with it, each time you choose even slightly differently than habit would dictate, you're creating new neural pathways that will gradually become more accessible with practice. Sleep approaches now that natural reset of consciousness that allows integration of all you've contemplated. As you drift toward that threshold between wakefulness and dreams, imagine these patterns not as fixed aspects of your identity, but as visitors you've hosted for too long, familiar presences you can gradually release as you make room for different ways of being. The darkness around you feels peaceful now, a space of potential rather than absence. Your breathing has found its natural rhythm, your body surrendering to the support beneath it. The world outside continues in its motion, but here, in this moment, there is only the gentle transition from awareness to sleep. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities, moments where these micro-habits will likely appear again. But you'll meet them now with something new, the recognition that sees them for what they are. Not truths about you or the world, but patterns, habits, adaptations that have outlived their usefulness. This recognition doesn't guarantee immediate change, nor should it. Patterns established over years or decades aren't transformed overnight. But each moment of awareness creates possibility. Each small shift in response builds momentum toward a different way of experiencing yourself and your life. As consciousness continues its gentle dissolution into sleep, know that this work continues even in your deepest rest. The brain processes and integrates new information during sleep, consolidating learning and preparing for new possibilities upon waking. Your eyes have grown heavy now, thoughts drifting like leaves on a slow-moving stream. The boundaries between conscious reflection and dreams become increasingly permeable, allowing deeper wisdom to emerge in its own time, in its own way. The exploration of these micro-habits that fuel depression doesn't end here, but continues in the quiet moments of your days, in the small choices to respond differently when patterns emerge, in the gradual building of new neural pathways through consistent, gentle practice. For now, though, there is only this moment of transition, this surrender to sleep and all the healing it brings. The weight of effort can be set aside, the striving for change temporarily released. In this space of rest, transformation happens without your conscious direction. Wisdom emerges without your deliberate seeking. So I think you must be dreaming about all this by now, so I'll just leave the fireplace burning to keep you feeling comfortable and warm. Sleep well, knowing that awareness itself is the beginning of change, that recognition without judgment creates the space where new possibilities can grow. Tomorrow brings fresh opportunities for small, significant shifts in how you relate to yourself and your experience. But tonight is for rest, for the quiet integration that happens beneath the surface of consciousness, for the gentle healing that sleep brings to both mind and body.